Beneath this beautiful home in Connecticut lies the history of a family who, for generations, made great contributions to ease the suffering of others. It was this article entitled Caroline's Incredible Lilacs that led Martha Hall Kelly to the Bellamy Faraday home, and where she began her 10-year journey to write her first novel. She went there to tour the beautiful gardens, but says she fell in love with its owner, New York socialite Caroline Ferriday, and her fascinating life.
She worked at the French consulate in New York during the war. She set up a whole organization that supported orphan children of French resistance fighters. And after the war, France awarded her the French Legion of Honor and the Cross of Lorraine. Caroline used her old manual Remington typewriter as a weapon. She was very vocal about civil rights. She started the first black bank in Harlem. She sought out injustices around the world, and she used correspondence to make sure people knew about it.
In her debut novel, Lilac Girls, Kelly details the heroic efforts of Caroline, the real-life actress and activist who championed a group of concentration camp survivors called the Rabbits.
They were Polish women that were operated on at Ravensbrück concentration camp, Hitler's only all-female concentration camp in Germany, to test sulfa drugs. And the Nazis not only used them as their laboratory animals, but after the experiments, the women hopped about the camp. So the Nazis nicknamed them the Rabbits. That was a generation that felt like they had to give back no matter what. She was very wealthy, could have done anything with her money, and she spent it helping these young women that had been so brutalized. So,
a former advertising copywriter, Kelly spent a decade researching, writing, and traveling to Poland and Germany before publishing Lilac Girls, an instant hit around the world. Intrigued by Caroline's contributions, Kelly found equally inspiring Caroline's mother, Eliza, the subject of her second novel, Lost Roses.
Before Lilac Girls, there was another incredible true story of resilient women who lost everything in World War I and came back even stronger.
Set a generation earlier, Kelly's Lost Roses is a prequel and follows Eliza Faraday, who was friends with Sophia, a member of the Russian royal family, chronicling true events and three equally strong women from Russia to France.
It starts out with being a gift, this rose, from Eliza to Sophia. Sophia brings it back with her to Russia, and I know we can't say too much because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but she carries that rose with her all the way full circle back to the United States, and it's kind of a nice metaphor.
Relying partially on letters written by Eliza, Kelly weaves a story that illustrates Eliza's relationship with a young Caroline, the fall of Tsarist Russia, and efforts to help her friends and others find safety as they escape the revolution. Join us as we discuss her research, writing style, and her next historic prequel on this first-person one-on-one with Martha Hall Kelly, presented by St. Louis County Library and HEC Media. Martha Hall Kelly, welcome to St. Louis.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure, and you have been very, very busy these last few years. So your background as an advertising copywriter, how did that prepare you to write your first novel of fiction, historical fiction, and still that first book becomes such a great success?
Well, advertising copywriting was great because it made me think about the reader. And oftentimes I think sometimes writers write for themselves, but as a copywriter, you have a client in mind when you're writing a salad dressing commercial. You're trying to show them the benefits. And I think that really helped me when I went to write a novel.
So tell me the story, I think I read this somewhere, about how this came to be when someone encouraged you to write a book.
I went up to visit an old house in Bethlehem, Connecticut. I lived in Fairfield, Connecticut at the time, about an hour away. And it was Mother's Day, and my mom had just passed away, so I was really sad. And my husband said, why don't you go up and see that house you've always wanted to go see? And he was talking about the Bellamy Faraday house and garden. And he knew I wanted to see it because I carried a clipping in my wallet for months, and the title of it was Caroline's Incredible Lilacs. And I love lilacs, and my mother loved them, so I thought it would be a really nice way to honor her. So he said, I'll take care of the kids, and he did not have to ask me twice. I got in the car and went up and visited that house, and the garden was incredible. It was when all the lilacs were coming out, and they smelled so great. And I thought, I'll go visit the inside of the house, because they have docents that take you around. It's a museum now, because Caroline died in 1990. I never got to meet her. But she told me the story of Caroline and how she brought these Polish Catholic women to the United States for rehabilitation after they were so horribly mutilated their legs when they were experimented on at Ravensbrück concentration camp. And after that, I couldn't stop thinking about that story.
Right, and that's when Lilac Girls was born, your first novel. That's been such a huge success, New York Times bestseller. And now we've got the prequel of Lost Roses. Why do it that way? Why write Lilac Girls and then do a prequel? How did that come to be, and that thought process?
Well, I didn't really plan any of it. I didn't even plan to write a novel, because I'd never taken a creative writing class in school, or I was a journalism major. And it just kind of happened. It's a strange thing. I researched her for a really long time, and then I went through a Starbucks drive-thru and ordered a decaf cappuccino, and by mistake, the barista gave me a caffeinated one, and I went home, and the whole thing just started coming out. I had researched it for so long. So that's how Lilac Girls happened. I really didn't plan it. And then once it became a hit, which was such a surprise, I went back to my publisher and asked if I could write 2 more prequels. One, going back in time to World War I, about Caroline's mother, Eliza, and how she brought a group of white Russian women, helped them when they came to the United States with nothing. That was book 1. And then book 2 was a Civil War book. And they said, okay, great, write them.
You talked about you were so surprised that it became a number 1. I'm surprised that you're surprised, because there's
Really?
Yes, because there's such a connection to these strong women, to the history. I try to put myself in the place of these women. With Lost Roses, you had the 3 strong women were Eliza, the mother of Caroline, Faraday, a true living human being, Sophia, the aristocratic Russian, and then Varenka, who was the Russian commoner who worked for Sophia. I found that was interesting that you wrote in those 3 voices, 3 strong women in their own right. And I just connected to them. And I kept thinking, they are so young. And what they lived through is amazing. And you were so detailed and descriptive that I felt a connection.
Well, that's great.
And so that's why do you think that's why maybe your readers have connected with these characters and became such a big seller?
I wonder what the secret sauce is. I've gone back and thought maybe it's Kasha in Lilac Girls, because she went through such hardship, one of the rabbits, and had these terrible experiments done on her, and she was so young when it all happened. I get a lot of mail about her from people saying, if she can get through that, I can get through my opioid addiction or these terrible things that's happened to me. So maybe it's Kasha, but I also tell the story in Lilac Girls through Herta Oberhauser's eyes. She was the only female doctor at the all-female camp, a Nazi doctor, woman. And so I think people really love looking at the world through Herta's eyes. And then there's Caroline, who, that was a generation that felt like they had to give back no matter what. She was very wealthy, could have done anything with her money, and she spent it helping these young women that had been so brutalized. So I think that people just connect to those stories, and the same is true for Lost Roses. Sophia goes through terrible things. Even though she was a cousin to the Tsar, she loses everything. And that, to me, was really fascinating. What happens when you've had everything and then you have nothing? Even, I don't want to give any spoilers, but even people in your family you no longer have. So I think I'm always drawn to that.
So why did you write in the story and the voice, both stories, in the voices of these women, whether it's Varenka, Eliza in this case, and Sophia? Why did you do it that way?
You know, I had never written a book before, and I just thought it would be a really good way to do it and bring the experience to the reader. And I had a journalism background, at least in school, and I knew how to research, and I knew how to make that world come alive and kind of go into that world myself. I thought it would be really interesting almost to report on it as the character and bring that back.
Right. Yeah, because you do a lot of research. I mean, tons of it. Not only do you do the research, but you travel to literally every place that's in the book.
I love the research part. It's so much fun. For Lilac Girls, I went to Poland and Germany. I brought my son with me. And that was really helpful in getting that voice because I had the New England voice. I grew up in Massachusetts and Connecticut. I had Caroline's voice for Lilac Girls, but I didn't really have the German voice or the Polish voice. But as soon as I went to Lublin, Poland, as soon as I went to the concentration camp in Germany, Ravensbrück, I started writing scenes while I was there. It was super helpful. And the same thing is true for Lost Roses. Right away, once Random House acquired it, I went to Russia. And that was so helpful because Sophia is a cousin to the Tsar, so I had to go to all the palaces and kind of soak in that kind of excessive Russian thing. I also had to go to Paris.
Had to.
And I had to. And that was really helpful because they all meet up in Paris at the end in Lost Roses.
Right. And, you know, so being historical fiction, it is historically based, is true. So the characters that were fictional aside was definitely Varenka. You felt she was key to the story. I read somewhere, too.
I needed someone that brings danger into the storyline, and also someone to represent the other side of Tsarist Russia, not just the wealthy, but what was it like to be a peasant girl during the war. So I really loved getting into her head and her character.
Mother-daughter relationships play a huge role in Lost Roses, for sure. In it, we get a better idea of the relationship between Caroline and her mother, Eliza. How did you find that out, or is that some of that's just from your own imagination?
You mean the true
the
story?
true relationship between the two of them.
They have a lot of letters left. Caroline has 3 archives. One is underneath the Bellamy Faraday house in Bethlehem, Connecticut. One is in Nanterre, France, at a university, and one is at the U.S. Holocaust Museum. So I delved into all 3 of those and read letters mostly. I mean, in those days, that was the kind of email of the day. So they've got a lot of letters. I talked to people that knew them, and then the rest of it was just I put them in situations and had them interact.
Speaking of the letters, but you also got to meet one of the Ravensbrück survivors, did you not?
Oh, I did too.
That was
actually.
operated on. That was
yes.
Rabbits, one of the rabbits.
I went to Ravensbrück once, and then I went back again for the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the camp. Once I had a book deal, and the book was in the works, and I brought my friend Stacy Fitzgerald, who is doing a documentary called Saving the Rabbits. And she brought a film crew, and she interviewed the 2 rabbits that were there. There were 5 left at the time. They're in their 90s. And we got to talk to 2 of them, and they were unbelievable.
I zostały mi tylko po niej fotografie. Zresztą, mój Boże, ja stara, ona już dawno zestarzała się, już jej nie ma dawno. Ale tak przyjaźniłyśmy się.
Stacy has amazing footage of these women, and it's just, I mean, it's so emotional. And one of the things they talk about is that they held on to that hatred for a while, but then they all got together and realized that the Nazis didn't kill them. They wanted to, but they survived. And they had to let the hate go, and once they did, they improved physically, mentally, and they traveled around Germany speaking to groups.
Such resilience.
It's really inspiring.
Your website, MarthaHallKelly.com, truly an open book in the sense of you explain your writing process, which is kind of rare, in the sense that you write just the character wall, you talk about that. I love that. I find it fascinating, coming from a journalistic background, how you kind of came through it. And I love that Tom Brady was on there.
Oh, God.
What was he going to?
So
Sophia's husband, Afron, wasn't it? Afon. How do you say his name?
Afon.
Afon, excuse me.
Yes.
Afon. So How did doing that help you?
It was so great. Yeah. I don't know where I saw that online. It was like a writer's blog or something, talked about how you have to take pictures wherever you can find them of what you think your character looks like. And with Lilac Girls, the first book, I put them all over my office. I put the Nazis on one side and the rabbits on the other side because I didn't think that, they should be on the same wall together. And so when I was writing Lost Roses, I did everything very superstitiously the same way I did with Lilac Girls. So I got all these pictures and I put them all over my office. And a fawn, Sophia's very handsome husband, I found a picture that I thought looked like a fawn, and I put it up. And then once I publicized it, someone told me, that's Tom Brady that you put up there. I'm from Massachusetts. I should know that.
This.
Yeah, but I didn't. But I just thought he was an attractive man. I don't know.
Yes, he is. And a good football player.
Yes.
That's so funny. Now, in Lost Roses, you introduce a new character, Julia Marlowe, Eliza's good friend and mentor. How come you didn't include her in Lilac Girls?
I did, actually. But I took her out because she was only in it very briefly, and I thought I didn't do her justice. So I saved her for the second book because she actually was a really good friend of Eliza's. So I thought I'd make her kind of a major character in that. I love her character, though. She was a legit huge star at the time.
So there really was a Julia Marlowe.
Oh, yes, okay. And I went to her house in the Catskills. It's really sad because it's no longer the grand place that it once was, but walking around there was just really, you could feel her presence still. Beautiful house in the Catskills.
So interesting. Tell me about the photos you found of Caroline Faraday. Is it like you've struck gold every time new pictures come up?
Exactly how it is, yes. And it happens all the time. There are beautiful archives underneath the house in Bethlehem, and there are archivists, and they do a really beautiful job of keeping everything in really good shape. But every once in a while, a new picture comes up. We actually, I was at the house one day, and one of the docents said, come see what I found. And they had opened, there were some secret drawers in not Caroline's main desk, but a different one, and it had kind of a sawtooth wooden detail, and there were hidden drawers. And he pulled out one of the drawers and pulled out this beautiful oval frame with a green velvet tie on it, and it was a picture of Caroline and her mother, but Caroline was like maybe a year old. Is the most beautiful picture, and she has roses at her right here in her dress, and I took it as a sign that, because I had just started Lost Roses, but so once in a while you find something that is a surprise.
So let's talk about the title, Lost Roses.
Well, Caroline's favorite rose was the Catherine Zeman rose, and it's an antique rose, but a lot of people have it in their gardens today. As well, it's at Caroline's house. It's one of the most beautiful roses in June. It's a gorgeous white shrub rose. And I just thought, wouldn't it be nice if that motif kind of carries through the whole book? And it's a wonderful, I think, symbol of these two sisters that went through so much. And it starts out with being a gift, this rose, from Eliza to Sophia. Sophia brings it back with her to Russia, and I know we can't say too much because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but she carries that rose with her all the way full circle back to the United States, and it's kind of a nice metaphor.
We talked about your travels. So you went to Paris. You did visit the Russian section of Paris, did you not?
Yes.
Was that helpful for you in terms of being able to describe what it was like? Or were there people who had, sure, some are still alive from World War II?
Well, it was incredibly helpful. What happened was I went to Russia, came back, wrote the manuscript. I passed it in to my editor, and she said, we love it, but we need more Paris. And I think those are the words every writer likes to hear. So I had to go back to Paris because all three characters end up there at the end. And I knew there was a Russian Orthodox cathedral that I wanted to see on this street called Rue d'Aru. And it's got the beautiful golden onion domes right in the middle of Paris. I had never seen it before. So we visited it, and it has this beautiful painted crypt that's in the book. And then we went to the rest of the street, and we realized it's like a ghost town. But those are the places that the Russian emigres the White Russians who had been forced out of Russia, and they were sitting on their suitcases waiting to go back to Russia, but that never happened because they were expecting the White Army to be victorious, and they never were. So they all just kind of went to other places and left restaurants and apartment buildings, and it's like a ghost town now. Nobody lives there. So it's really interesting. If you're ever in Paris, you have to go check it out.
That's fascinating. I mean, that was something you didn't know then till you got there?
No,
Interesting.
not at all. There's also a brothel in the book in Paris, and that is still there. Not as a brothel, but it's, I think, an apartment building now. But there are so many things from World War I that are still in Paris that nobody even knows that used to be, a brothel or a thriving community of White Russians.
And the Faraday family had an apartment there. Do they still have something there?
No, Caroline was the last of the line, sadly. She had no children, so I think that was always really sad for her, that she had this long line of Wolseley ancestors, and she was the last of them.
Yes, because so Lost Roses, we know her as a young girl, and you sent her more on her mother, who was a bit eccentric. Would you describe her as that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Eliza.
In a good way.
She comes from a lineage of very strong, fight for your right kind of women. And your other prequel, coming out, the third book, about the Civil War, that Civil War era, that's going to be talking about her grandmother?
Well, it's her great-grandmother, Jane Eliza, and Jane Eliza's daughter, Georgianne, who would be Caroline's great-aunt. And one thing that was really interesting in how I start the third book is the mom, Jane Eliza, and some of the older girls were in Charleston visiting friends before the Civil War, and they stumbled upon a slave auction on a side street, and they saw human beings being sold, and it changed them forever. They became staunch abolitionists. And so that's a big part of the book is their fight against slavery.
How is it to take something that's historically accurate, and then weave in your creative side of it and make it more the fiction side of it? Is it fun to do?
Oh, it's really fun. And it's super helpful because I do these giant outlines and I know what's going to happen. With Lilac Girls, for example, I can't give the ending, but I knew what the true story was, so I had my structure already. It's hard, though, on the other hand, because you have to stick to that. You can't just, have Hitler doing something that he wasn't doing.
Was Sophia a real character? Was she truly a cousin of the Tsar's family?
She's based on a real person. I read this incredible book called The Russian Countess, and this woman, Edith Solihu, I just became so enthralled with her and her life. She lost everything after the Bolshevik Revolution, and her attitude was so great about it. She picked up and came back from it. And it's a really good companion book, actually, to this one because it's a memoir from her point of view. So I kind of based Sophia on her.
I want to talk about recording audiobooks. What's that experience like, recording and producing, and was it what you expected?
Oh, so much fun. It is, the first one, I didn't have as much I wasn't as involved. I got to read my author's note, and that was really fun. But in this one, I got to have more of a say in the casting, and I really, really loved Kathleen Gotti and how she performed Kasha in Lilac Girls. So I asked if she could come back as Sophia, and I just love her. I really would love to find a spot in the next book for her as well too, because she's just so good. I don't know if you watch General Hospital, but she's on General Hospital, and she's just really
good with accents.
Wonderful, really good with accents. Yeah. So people are telling me that this audiobook is one of their favorites. There's 4 characters this time, because Sophia's little sister Luba is in it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Who's a key part, Luba.
Oh,
Luba,
I love Luba.
Yeah, you start
People
with her
love
and you end
Luba.
with her. Yeah. Well, she's endearing and, again, another strong woman. And lastly, you have quite a connection with your book clubs. Your website features the menu ideas. I loved that because my book club, sadly, is disbanded, but we used to do that. We don't take the theme, we have the food, and you provide. Did you help with the recipes? I mean, are you that involved?
Well, a lot of them are from the book. My publisher helps a lot with that. For this book, there's some vodka involved, which is really fun, and some rose drinks and things. Yeah, it's a collaborative effort.
Right, because book clubs like that, like to have that theme. Did you even know that?
I did not know that when it first started, because I've never been in a book club, but they seem to have a lot of fun, and they send me pictures, which makes me feel like I have actually been to a book club.
And I think single-handedly you've helped the tourism of Bethlehem, where Caroline's house was, right?
Yes. It started out, well, that day that I went up there, I was the only person on the tour, and now they're averaging about 80 people a day. Wow. Yeah, which they're a little overwhelmed. It's a very sleepy little beautiful town, but they're also really excited because it's getting the word out. But when those tour buses pull up full of women, they're a little
All the book clubs coming into town. Well, Martha Hall Kelly, thank you so much. We look forward to your next prequel set in the Civil War. Any titles yet?
Well, it will be a sunflower. That's the. So it went from lilacs to roses to sunflower.
The theme is working then. Terrific. Thank you so much for coming to St. Louis, and thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's just a fun destination. Happy about it.